Think of this as a system diagnostic. We're going to analyze a cognitive collapse that's being driven by a single variable, speed. First, we have to deconstruct the blueprint for how thinking is actually supposed to work. Then, we can pinpoint exactly how and where that system breaks down.
So let's start with the core assumption, right? That getting answers faster makes us smarter. I mean, it seems logical, but when you run a system analysis, you start to see a fundamental conflict.
And here's the core of our analysis. Speed doesn't just accelerate the cognitive process. It actually triggers a system override, one that replaces deep thinking altogether. Okay, so to properly diagnose a system failure, we have to map its baseline function first. We need to know how it's supposed to work, so we're going to start with the cognitive blueprint for what we call deep thinking. First off, deep thinking isn't just about thinking harder. It's actually a structured, multi-staged cognitive system. And like any system, it has required inputs and processes. The crucial inputs here are time, effort, and iteration. You take any of those away, and the whole system just can't run. So this is what that cognitive loop actually looks like. And notice, it's not just a straight line. Right after the input, the system enters a state of cognitive load and struggle. Now, that struggle phase isn't a flaw. It's the engine of the entire system. It's where you form hypotheses, test them, and refine them until you produce genuine understanding. And if you could zoom in on that loop, you'd see all these invisible mechanisms firing away. Your working memory is juggling multiple, often conflicting, ideas. Your brain is actively generating and testing these little mini hypotheses. It's detecting its own errors and then correcting them. The whole process is messy, it's iterative, and most importantly, it absolutely depends on having enough time and putting in the effort.
All right, so now that we've defined the baseline system, let's introduce the external variable, the instant answer. And this doesn't function as a helpful tool. It acts as a complete system override.
This is the critical distinction we have to make. An instant answer doesn't upgrade or improve the cognitive loop. It creates a shortcut that bypasses the core processing stages completely. And this is what a system collapse looks like. Just compare it to the cognitive loop we just saw. This new path is totally linear. Input, answer, recognition, and you're out. The entire middle layer, the struggle, the testing, the refinement, it's just gone. The system has been short-circuited.
So now we can run a proper diagnostic. Let's pinpoint exactly where and how that original system fails the moment an instant answer gets introduced.
This side-by-side comparison makes the breakdown incredibly clear. The deep thinking system demands high time and high effort, and its output is understanding. The instant answer system, on the other hand, uses minimal time and low effort, and its output is just raw information. These two systems aren't just different in degree, they are completely different in kind.
So failure point number 1. The struggle phase is completely removed. You see, cognitively, that feeling of uncertainty is a signal. It's what triggers your brain to switch from passively taking in information to actively solving a problem. Without that struggle, the deep thinking system never even turns on.
And that leads us directly to the second failure point. The effort layer gets bypassed. Effort is what activates the higher-order thinking functions in your prefrontal cortex. Without it, your brain just stays in this low-energy pattern recognition mode. You're not reasoning, you're just matching.
And finally, the third and maybe the most devastating failure, the iteration loop. That whole process of trying, failing, adjusting, and trying again is eliminated. That loop is the only mechanism we have for building accuracy and depth. Without it, there's no refinement, there's no error correction, there's nothing.
So, what's the ultimate consequence of this total system failure?
Well, it's not just a lack of knowledge. It's actually something far more dangerous, the illusion of understanding.
Your brain, which is always trying to save energy, confuses two very different signals. Recognition, which just says, hey, I've seen this information before, gets mistaken for understanding, which is the ability to generate, explain, and apply that information from scratch. It's a false signal of competence.
And the long-term consequences of that are pretty severe. We see a systemic shift toward shallow, recognition-based thinking. We lose the ability to build complex mental models. Our capacity for genuine problem-solving goes down. And we start to develop this dependency on external systems, not as aids, but as replacements for thought, which causes our tolerance for complexity to just plummet.
And this brings us to the final diagnosis from our system analysis. It's a really simple but profound insight about the nature of thinking itself.
Here's the central diagnosis. The value isn't located in the answer. It's generated in the process between the question and the answer. That space, that gap filled with struggle, effort, and iteration, that is the act of thinking.
You can even think of it as a simple formula. The depth of your understanding is basically a function of time multiplied by effort multiplied by iteration. If you reduce any one of those variables, you reduce the depth. It's that simple.
And this equation reveals the system's absolute failure condition. When you remove that core variable of time, when you make answers instant, the entire equation just collapses. If time approaches zero, then death must also approach zero. It's a mathematical and a cognitive certainty.
Which leaves us with this final, unavoidable conclusion. Speed isn't improving thinking. It's replacing it. When the answer is the only thing that matters, and that process to get there is completely removed, the act of thinking itself becomes obsolete. So the real question we have to ask is, what kind of thinkers do we become when our cognitive systems are constantly being bypassed?